Allora, questa introduzione la faccio così in italiano, molto semplicemente per dire che è un piacere avervi qui e do il buongiorno a tutti e il benvenuto in questo Parlamento per questa occasione molto importante. Abbiamo l'opportunità, you have the opportunity to have Mr. Francesco Profumo connected, so I will give him, Francesco, the floor for introductory remarks. Prego, Francesco, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a really important event, and I'm very pleased to contribute on this. Then let me start. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's really a great pleasure to welcome you at the presentation of the ENEMED and Italian Energy Report and share with you some starting thought. Over the past years, the global macroeconomic scenario has been affected by a series of disruptive events. The COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the growing tension between China and Taiwan, and in recent weeks, a new escalation in the Middle East. The common backdrop to all these events is raw materials and energy supplies, crucial factors in achieving the goal of ecological transitions, but also a strategic and geopolitical asset on which the main global economies compete. The risks of this scenario are quite evident. In its 2023 Strategic Foresight Report, the European Commission mentioned this issue. I want to quote a sentence that, in my opinion, is very significant. Evolving geopolitical shifts are shaping public opinion and how governments across the globe act, challenging international cooperation on global issues such as climate change or the energy transition. In this new global disorder, Europe has a unique opportunity to reaffirm the Union's international leadership and to operate the so-called Brussels effects, that typically European capacity to lead the debate through a sort of soft power and without the need to impose its standards or targets. In Europe, we started the energy transitions process before our main competitors, the United States and China, and we therefore have a responsibility to promote our model and play a global role in pursuing sustainability, carbon neutrality, accompanying the rest of the world in this ambitious process. For example, the fifth 455 reform package in support of the ecological transition and against climate change is a unique initiative on which Europe is also investing its political credibility and authority. The same goes for the EU mission Climate Neutral and Smart Cities program, addressed to the 100 European cities that the Commission has selected to adopt policies and actions to achieve climate neutrality by the year 2030. I am therefore very happy and proud that the presentation of this energy report delivered by SRM and ESL at the Energy Center of the Politecnico of Torino is taking place in the European Parliament, a special place that we must consider as our home, a place that must be at the service of all of us. As dear friends of mine, David Sassoli reminded in his first speech as President of the Parliament, Europe still has much to say if we know how to work together, if we know how to put politics at the service of our citizens, if Parliament listens to their wishes, fears, and needs. This is why, in times of greatest uncertainty, research of excellence, quantitative analysis, and a multidisciplinary approach as required, creating the right conditions where decision makers could develop the best strategies for the future and the common good. Given its frontier position and the progressive shift of many dynamics from the north and the east to the south, the Mediterranean area and our country in particular will be more and more important what happens, let me say, at home, has a relevant impact not only throughout Europe, but also globally. Only if Europe and the Mediterranean area are stable can the rest of the world also be stable. This is why the commitment of the Compagnia di San Paolo, a local player with a global outlook, has been and will be strong. As a founding partner in cooperation with Intesa San Paolo Bank, our foundation is highly involved in supporting this knowledge laboratory and contributing to the debate in an area characterized by permanent change. We needed to leverage to reliable actors. I want to congratulate Massimo De Andres, Professor Ettore Bompard, and their fantastic teams for this outstanding work. I thank you for your attention and wish you a fruitful session.
Thank you, Mr. Profumo, and we can continue our meeting. Welcome again to this year's presentation of the MEDA and Italian Energy Report. Firstly, I would like to thank my colleague Tiziana Beghin, who is here, and Marco Zanni for hosting this event, and all those who contributed to its organization. Every year, SRM and the Politecnico di Torino, with the support of Fondazione San Paolo and the President Profumo, deliver a complete and very detailed report capable to informing the energy debate in Italy and at EU level. European economy is a critical juncture. We thought the pandemic was the most difficult challenge after World War II. But another actual war on the European soil and the other one going on in the Middle East have hit our optimism about a fast recovery for our economies and instead posed enormous threats to the stability of our system. If on the one hand, Europe has the best ratio of energy consumption to GDP, consuming far less energy than China and also less than US as a proportion of GDP, on the other hand, Europe has the largest energy dependency among big economies, with an average of 55.5% of energy imports. In short, we are more efficient, but also fragile because we are more dependent. Among the major European countries, Italy especially has the biggest level of energy dependency at 73.5, as the report shows. Security of supply and the goal of reducing dependency have become essential elements of European energy strategies. The European Council conclusion of March 2023 declared the political goal of the need to phase out of EU dependency on Russian gas, oil and coal imports as soon as possible. This political goal has been translated in several initiatives, some of which already came in with the Repower EU, that aimed at accelerating the ecological transition through a series of measures. diversification of energy supply, energy savings, increased penetration of renewable, and the development of a new energy careers. As an emergency measure, already during the first month of the crisis, we worked, and I had the honor to being part of this team. We worked on the regulation to introduce gas storage obligation to make sure member states had enough gas stored for every winter until 2025, the next winter. And I am currently finalizing on behalf of my group 2 other crucial pieces of legislation that aim at addressing other issues identified by the report. In particular, REMIT and gas and hydrogen regulation. Manipulations happened on the European energy markets and their functioning was questioned on several levels. With the recast of REMIT, the regulation on transparency and integrity on the wholesale energy markets, we will make sure there is more control on price dynamics and on market manipulation after the pikes in energy prices was experienced in 2022. A stronger role for ACER is crucial in that regard, and the European Parliament and myself in particular fought for it, for the stronger role of ACER. Another agreement is close, and I have worked on it in these last weeks. It is, as I mentioned, it is the hydrogen and gas market regulation that is designing the market for decarbonized gases that will make European energy independence a reality, biogas and, the most important, hydrogen. The report underlines that a shift of the energy barycenter from the east to the south, thus restoring centrality to the Mediterranean, is already happening. That's exactly why we are working, and these are the last hours of negotiation on the regulation to make sure that gas and hydrogen tariffs, as well as the governance, above all governance of this system, of the future market, will enable this new reality for Europe. This is to say that this year's focus of the report on geopolitics of energy in the Mediterranean area is extremely timely. As all of previous report, I had the chance to read and to present in this Parliament with you in the past years. I want to underline this point because I want to appreciate that every year you hit the mark with your report. Every year you put the focus in the main question. I look forward to listening to the presentation as well to the debate, and I am sure they both will provide us with valuable information. Thank you. I will give the floor to my colleague Tiziana Beghin.
Thank you very much, Patrizia, and thanks to the organizer of this conference, Francesco Profumo and Massimo De Andres. And I would like to thank also all the guests who are present today and overall the researchers that who have contributed to this project. This year edition of the MED and the Italian Energy Reports, as remarked by Patrizia in her last comment, holds particular significance as it focuses on a specific analytical perspective, the integrated connection between geopolitics and energy. Recognizing that the accessibility of energy resources is inherently constrained by geography, it becomes evident that political and diplomatic intervention are essential to secure access to these resources. It involves delicate balancing acts, particularly when relationships with other nations are contentious. Take the example of Russia, for instance. Certainly, it is an unsettling scenario from which there is no easy escape, relying solely on politics is inadequate for addressing the issue. Therefore, close collaboration with the scientific community is imperative. With this principle in mind, I wish to underscore the significance of this report, and its primary objective is to support political and also industrial decisions through a foundation of robust scientific evidence. Hence, the significance of presenting a study of such importance within the European Parliament, with the participation of representatives from various institutions, including the Commission and the permanent representation, emphasizes the leadership recognition of the crucial connection between science and politics. However, I let the facts speak for themselves, as the recent European policies demonstrate that our commitment and attention are real. Consider, for example, the energy trilemma, formally introduced by the World Energy Council, which crystallizes the three main attributes that any energy system should have. Environmental sustainability at first place, energy security, and last, energy equity. Without going into detail, and our guests will dig into the more technical aspect, of course, I will limit myself to mentioning some of the measures that the EU has put forward in a pioneering way in favor of these three key attributes. Firstly, environmental sustainability. So, an unprecedented package of measures and investments, namely the Green Deal, is trying to transform the energy and economic structure of the EU to make Europe the first continent with net zero CO2 emissions. By the way, the Net Zero Industry Act, a dedicated investment plan to strengthen the European technological and manufacturing sector, has just been approved in plenary. My political force vote against the final text, not because of the Commission proposal itself, initially extremely positive in our opinion, but because of some amendments that, in our view, undermine its real effectiveness. Second point, the energy security. The EU adopted a Repower EU plan, as mentioned, a package of measures aimed at ensuring the energy security of the continent in light of the problems arising from the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Precisely, tomorrow, the ITRE committee will vote on the Critical Raw Material Act, a measure aimed at ensuring a more sustainable and secure supply of critical materials for the energy transition. And third, the fair access to energy, the so-called energy equity. Unfortunately, this is a black mark for the EU, as even today 10% of EU citizens suffer from energy poverty. But that does not mean that we are not addressing the problem. In fact, the EU serves as a virtuous model of how diplomacy between member states can lead to upstanding synergy. Let me highlight examples such as the single market, the extensive network of cross-border energy infrastructure, facilitating the interconnection of energy systems across the EU, and the distinctive EU energy platform for gas procurement. This fruitful collaboration among members has allowed, as far as possible, to stabilize its energy prices in time of crisis. However, all this seems not to be enough. Why? Because these three key aspects, sustainability, security, and equity, are extremely interconnected. And frequently, actions in favor of one can result in adverse consequences for the others. Not to mention the unpredictable events that may occur, over which we have no control. In this context, I would like to reiterate the role played by the Mediterranean Sea, which effectively connects Europe to the south and the southeast of the world. The case of the Mediterranean is of extreme relevance, since many of the resources we were talking about at the beginning belong to places like Africa and the Middle East. And the channel of access to these resources is precisely the Mediterranean Sea. So I conclude, for all that these reasons, I'd like to sincerely thank all the collaborators and researchers who have contributed to the creation of this report. It helps shed light of the complexity of these intertwined dynamics, presenting concrete and useful scenarios in the hand of all stakeholders, both in the political sphere and in the private sector. So I thank you very much. I do not take any time, and I leave the floor, I think, to the contribution of Marco Zanni, and then I wait to know your comments of the speaker. Thank you very much.
Dear all, thank you very much for your kind invitation to this important event in Brussels. Unfortunately, I'm not able to actively participate in the discussion due to unforeseen commitments in Rome. Coming to the report you are presenting today, without any doubt, the energy supply represents one of the greatest challenges for the European Union today. The instability generated by recent geopolitical events proved us once more that it is necessary to reshape completely the way our countries satisfy their energy demand. In this sense, Europe is called to a prompt response to the issue, and I believe it's time to move to an energy production and supply system based on a multi-commodity approach. Looking at the findings presented in your report, it turned out that Europe has a way lower impact in terms of energy consumption compared to other competitors such as China and the United States. This data, I think, should be kept in mind if we think about all the green and environmental policies recently promoted by the European Commission, which, in my view, not only proved to be ineffective in tackling environmental issues, but they will also put at risk our production system and our industrial output. On the other hand, Europe, and Italy in particular, have the highest level of energy dependency from foreign countries, and it is necessary to find new sources of energy that are both clean and independent. New generation nuclear power plants, in my view, are a good example of what we need to balance our energy mix. But there are many others where Italy could lead a pragmatic energy revolution, such as, for example, biogas or biofuels. Moreover, the recent tensions in the Middle East and the evolution of the conflict in Ukraine have shown to all EU governments the urgent need to develop alternative infrastructures to guarantee energy supply. The Mediterranean area can and must play a determinant role in becoming the new energy hub for Europe. Our strategic position as an European bridge projected into the Mediterranean is an asset to increase the connectivity with our suppliers, as the bilateral agreements made with some African countries have shown. Last but not least, I would like to underline the conclusions presented in your report to address the much discussed topic of decarbonization. Data indicate us that a transition fully based on electric technology is not easy and would require high supply of critical raw materials that we cannot find in the European Union, exposing Italy and the whole Mediterranean area to the risk of a new and more dangerous dependency. This is why I would suggest a different solution that combines the gradual development of green technologies with a mix of traditional and innovative energy sources, such as biofuels or e-fuels. In conclusion, the topic of energy will be more and more central in the global arena, and it represents an important opportunity for the Mediterranean area to play a key role in the energy market for the future. However, to do so, I think it is necessary to implement policies that pragmatically help this dynamic, and we call the European legislator and regulators to make their part in this process. Thank you very much, and sorry again for not being able to be with you today.
Sorry, before the speech of Francesca Passamonti, let me thank my colleague Mercedes Bresso for your presence. And I want to underline she is very strongly engaged in energy question at our legislative work. Thank you, Mercedes. Please.
No. Thank you all, and good afternoon to you all, and a warm welcome to this hybrid event where we are presenting the joint SRM and Politecnico of Torino report, ENEMED and Italian Energy Report 2023, Geopolitics of Energy in the Mediterranean Area Between International Crisis and New Energy Commodities, a very large title. And first of all, on behalf of Intesa Sanpaolo, I would like to thank the honorable member Patrizia Toia, Tiziana Beghin, and Marco Zanni for their introductory speeches and for supporting also this year for the 5th time the presentation of our report on energy topics. This year reports, which follows the previous ones that cover the natural gas, renewables, hydrogen, and alternative fuels, focuses on the geopolitics of energy in the Mediterranean area, which is an area of particular interest for Italy that stretches into the Mediterranean Sea. And why such a report? Because since the outbreak of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, energy has been used as a weapon against the EU economy and has thus increased its geopolitical significance. For the EU, which is the area with the world's higher energy dependence from third countries, the current war represented an unprecedented economic shock that potentially could have been fatal for the EU economy. Securing energy supply has thus become a predominant issue, a matter also of industrial competitiveness and economic survival. While environmental sustainability and energy equity of energy sources, the other two elements of the energy trilemma, remain central elements of the EU policy framework. Ensuring such a balance is certainly a challenge. Against this background, the 5th SRM ESL and Politecnico di Torino report looks at how the geographic balance of energy sources has shifted from the east towards the south, and how such a move could weigh on the political and economic relations between the EU and the Mediterranean countries. And Italy, with this peninsula that extends into the Mediterranean, could play a significant role as interconnector between the northern and southern shore of the sea. But let me also explain why energy matters so much for a banking group like ours. Energy is very closely intertwined with the financial services industry from multiple angles. The financing one, because we are financing major EU energy companies and related infrastructures. The trading one, Intesa Sanpaolo is active on the commodities and derivatives markets. and post-trading, since we are also giving access to energy companies to the markets, and we are funding also the collateral exchange, which was a topic of high importance last year. And of course, also monitoring the developments around EU policies and reforms of the EU energy regulatory framework to address the energy crisis matters to us, since our bank needs to have all the relevant information to take appropriate and informed decisions when defining a lending strategy to this sector. As a large banking group, we are also participating in the public debates. We are an active participant in EU fora, where we advise industrial partners embracing transition towards new energy sources and how to structure bankable projects. And I'm referring here to the two so-called industrial alliances that are led by the Commission, the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance and the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuel, of which we are a member. Sharing research, the research conducted within our group and in collaboration with distinguished academic centers is also part of our mission. And this is why it is a real pleasure for us to present to you the 2023 Made Italian Energy Report. And now, without further delay, I would like to give the floor to the Massimo De Andres, who is the General Manager of the SRM. Massimo, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. Let me start by thanking MEPS Patrizia Toia, Tiziana Beghin, and Marco Zanni for hosting this meeting here in this wonderful room. And a special thanks to my colleague Francesca Passamonti, head of the Intesa Sanpaolo Banking Group office here in Brussels, and all the team for the support in organizing this meeting. I would like to start, if it's possible, to show some slides. Reminding you, as has been mentioned, that this is the 5th annual report. The aim of the report has always been to analyze the energy in the Mediterranean and the interactions between Europe and North Africa. Every year we have chosen a specific focus. In 2019, the focus was on gas. In 2020, the focus was on renewables to produce electricity. 2021, the focus was on hydrogen. And last year, in these days, more or less, we presented the report to 2022, which was on biofuel. This year, thanks to specific support of the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation, so there is also a great occasion for me to thank especially Professor Profumo. The focus, as you can check on the table of contents that you have in the slide, is on the relation between energy, technology, and geopolitics, always in the Mediterranean area. My agenda, while you are checking the agenda of my presentation, let me say that as it was for the previous year, the report has been produced in cooperation between SRM, which is an economic research center part of Intesa Sanpaolo Banking Group. So we act and we work for the bank and together with the bank. But the report is a cooperation with the Energy Security Lab of the Energy Center of the Politecnico School of Torino. And this is the reason why I will share my presentation with Professor Bompard, of the Politecnico University of Torino, and we also have the pleasure to have the Dean of the Politecnico School, Mr. Salacco. Let me start with my first slide with some key numbers. As you see, the first point of my presentation was energy geography, some key figures within the international economic context. And I think it's very interesting to look from this, to look at this slide. The slide shows a very interesting comparison between the United States, EU, and China. We also have put it India, but the key comparison is between United States, EU, 27 countries, and China. If you see the energy mix of the three areas, you clearly perceive that the European Union has the largest renewable share. It's 19%. It's the orange bar. You can see the orange bar is always for all the areas, the renewables. 19% for the European Union, which is more in comparison with the other regions. China, on the contrary, already has the largest use of coal, 55%, which is the black bar. But more interesting, in my mind, is to compare the total energy consumption with the GDP production, assuming, of course, that energy consumption is essential to produce and to generate economic growth and GDP. So if we look at these three areas, China, the United States, and the EU, in terms of total final energy consumption, and we compare this with the GDP, we clearly see that Europe has the best energy consumption to GDP ratio, consuming far less energy than China with, as you can see, a similar GDP. It's 16.7 trillion, the GDP of Europe. It's a little less than 18 trillions of dollars, the GDP of China, but with 3 times more energy consumption for China in comparison with Europe. I think this is a very important point to start with. But if we look from another angle, we see what is the true weaknesses of Europe, which is the energy dependency. Europe has 55%, as Mrs. Toia already mentioned, of dependency from energy import, and 55% is an average between Italy, for example, 73.5%, Germany, 63.5%, Spain, 69%, or France, 44.2%, less than the average of the European Union, thanks to the nuclear power. So 55.5% for Europe, while China is only 20% of dependency, and United States is self-sufficient. So this is very important because the energy geography is also a sort of geopolitical geography. And what is clear is that only with lower energy dependency, Europe could upgrade its geopolitical role. Considering now that electricity, first 2 slides were on energy. Now we look at electricity. Why? Electricity is the most common form of energy and use. So if we take a look of the electricity mix in Europe in the last 22 years, and we see how this electricity mix changed, it's interesting to note that renewables increased from 15% to 38%, and in the meantime, coal decreased from 31% to 16%. Nuclear still remains relevant for some countries, but shows a slowly decrease. Gas, on the other hand, increased plus 8% because it has been used, and we know, as a buffer to energy transition, being the fossil fuel, the one with the lower emission. But let's also check how coal increased by 1% from 2021 to 2022. You see, as an effect in a certain way, a side effect of the war in Ukraine, because some coal plants reopen after the war. And if we look more in details, more deeply, at the differences in the next slides between the 4 main continental economies and the evolution of their electricity generation mix in the last 20 years, what we see is that Italy, which is the first country you can see, increased significantly the use of gas up to 54%, is the green bar. And renewables for electricity production, 35% is the orange bar, which are now the 2 most important ways to produce electricity in Italy. But please also note, for example, that in 2022, Italy had a small decrease in renewables, minus 4%, due not to solar or wind plant reduction, but due to hydroelectric energy production reduction as a side consequence of climate change, because we had problems from that point of view in Italy last year. Spain is the country with the most balanced mix in a certain way. You see a more equilibrium in the different mix of the different commodities. Germany is the country with the highest use of coal, even if in strong reduction, but with a new revamp in 2022 versus 2021. And this revamp of Germany is the reason why we saw the growth of coal between 22-21 in Europe. So Germany is the country with the highest use of coal. And finally, France, where the mix is dominated by nuclear with the lowest level of renewables among big countries. Having seen these key numbers, let's now move on what we call the long-lasting effects of the war in Ukraine and the impact of the global instability. And in particular, you have slides, which is quite interesting, I think, as a result of the negative supply and price situation triggered by the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Gas demand in Europe decreased by almost 12% in 2022. And one of the major impacts of the war was what you can see in the three pies. The sharp decrease of import of gas from pipelines. This is gas imported via pipelines from Russia. It was 41.1% in 2021. It was 10% in 2022, so after the war, during the war, and it has been 6.3%, so a more intense decrease in the first 9 months at the 1st of October. I mean, these are the last data available, first 9 months of 2023. This is the European situation, but if you want to know, if you want to see the situation in Italy, we have a similar situation. You can see, for example, Tarvisio tag from Russia, which is the import of gas from Russia. It was 28.4% in 2020. It has been 2.4% at the 1st of November. So a sharp decrease. But on the other hand, you see an important increase in the import of gas from Algeria. That was 12% in 2020, and it has been more than 22% in 2022, and it has already reached the point of 20.2% at the 1st of November, so we expect we will have a similar figure for 2022. So in a certain way, the switch that we had, lower import from gas from Russia and higher import from Algeria, which is also a geopolitical switch from northeast of Europe, from the south of the Mediterranean. A new crisis in the Middle East now, unfortunately, is under our eyes. We have right now a low energy consequences of the crisis after the attack of Hamas in Israel. But what we see is an increased risk for a region where we have a lot of what we call vulnerable choke points. Because the point is not only the crisis right now, is the risk of a regionalization of the crisis. And from that point of view, we have to consider some key data. For example, if we put together the barrels of oil that every day, daily, pass through the Hormuz Strait and Suez Canal, we have 26 million barrels a day passing between the two straits. 10% of the world oil and 8% of the world gas pass every year through Suez. And everyone knows that Suez is less than, I think, 100 kilometers from the current core of the crisis. So only to say that the area is under a certain risk, and in case of regionalization of the conflict, we can see impact in the energy market. So what is clear is that war, politics, political instability, and energy shocks straighten Europe's transition toward renewables, and those would help not only to reach net zero emission, which is the climate target, but also to lower the EU energy dependency, which is one of the first points that we touch at the beginning. So 2 questions, but are there other security risks in this part? And what consequences on the geopolitical context, in particular for the Euro-Mediterranean region? So we know that there are no silver bullet, and there are side effects that have to be considered from the geopolitical and security perspective. The need, for example, of critical raw materials for solar and wind plant construction. In the report, you find a deeply analysis on cobalt, copper, lithium, manganese, natural graphite, nickel, phosphorus, platinum, rare earth. So you have deeply analysis, and this will increase future demand versus the current supply. So there is a question of price, there is a question of availability, and there is a question of price. And their availability, the role of top 3 producer countries for each, and the increasing 2030 demand, deeply analyzed in chapter 6, will have great impact on security and geopolitics. So a possible way forward to overcome difficulties from the technological point of view, and the point will be after in a couple of minutes elaborated more from by Professor Bompard, is what we call a multi-commodity approach. So aiming for a multi-commodity energy system based on RES, not only one choice, but a cocktail between different options. And from the geographical point of view, moving away from the historical fossil-based dialogue among the Mediterranean shore, which is what together with Professor Bompard, we call the black dialogue. Black because oil is black, and fossil, is black, and the traditional energetic dialogue between 2 shores of the Mediterranean is the black dialogue. Fossils against money to pay the commodity. To move to a race-based with solar, wind, and green hydrogen dialogue, where you can find a deeply analysis on this option in chapter 2 and chapter 3. I move quickly to this part, which is, the part on the critical raw material, because as I mentioned, it will be more elaborated by Professor Bompard. But I want to show you 2 slides. This first one, the critical raw materials are essential for new green energy technologies. For instance, lithium, nickel, cobalt are crucial to batteries. Rare earth elements are essential for wind turbines. Electricity networks need a huge amount of copper. You see in this graph the need of some critical raw materials for producing wind plants or solar plants, and the comparison with the need of critical raw materials for traditional fossils extraction. You see the difference. An offshore wind plant, for example, requires 9 times more critical raw materials than a gas-fired plant. And let's also consider that an electric car needs 207 kilos of critical raw materials, while a traditional car needs only 33 kilos of raw materials. What we want to underline is not that we do not, we need to move toward energy transition, but we also need to know what is necessary to do that and the consequences. And the potential risk on geopolitical side is due to a high geographical concentration of production. Production of many energy transition minerals is more concentrated than that of oil and natural gas. For lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements, the world top 3 producing nations control well over 3/4 of the global outputs. In some cases, a single country is responsible for around half of worldwide production. You can find a deeply analysis on that on the report. But just to mention, Congo and China are responsible for some 70 and 60 of percent of the global production of cobalt and rare earth. The key message of our report is on this part is that with energy transition toward renewables, we risk to move our energy dependency from commodity to raw materials. And Europe has already developed its strategy over critical raw materials, which is urgent to implement, especially in two key points. The first is maintaining a balanced mix of suppliers and avoiding to import only from a single country, even when it can be most convenient from the market perspective. And developing the critical raw material reuse and recycling market, which can help Europe to be a little less independent. In the last part of my report, in chapter 9, we analyze the growing role of ports as energy hub. This is I'm near to conclude. In fact, ports, and this is a very important message I want to underline, ports are not only logistic nodes, but also strategic energy hubs. Right now, fossil fuel, because of our economies, are still depending from oil and gas. So ports are now energy hubs for fossil fuel, but in the near future, ports will become essential also for green energy transition. Why I'm saying so? Because ports are energy hub right now, because pipelines arrive close to ports, because ports move tons of oil and gas all over Europe and, of course, for Italy. Ports normally host petrochemical industry plants and refineries. Ports are location for LNG storage. There are 103 operational LNG terminals in Europe. LNG was crucial in diversifying gas suppliers for Europe, and you can check in the 3 pies the growing role of LNG imports from United States that passed from 26% before the war to more than 30% in the first 9 months of this year. But ports are not only energy hubs for oil and gas, are also becoming essential hubs for green energy transition, and so a strategic geopolitical tools, because North European ports, for example, are already producing renewables with wind plants, offshore wind plants. Mediterranean ports can do and start to do that with solar plants, also with floating offshore solar plants, which is now a mature technology. Ports can also become distributors with their own energy communities in order to facilitate the energy transition process for surrounding industrial areas and for shipping industry. And close to port is located the petrochemical industry I mentioned before, talking about the ports as existing energy hub. But this petrochemical industry have to be converted to green biofuel production. So again, port is important also as a place for the reconversion of the petrochemical industry. But also ports are ideal location for host hydrogen valley. Critical raw materials that we saw comes from far away, need ports and logistics to move over long routes, and it's thanks to ports that the Euro-Mediterranean dialogue can be reboosted. This is my last slide, the following. Notwithstanding, Europe and Italy have to install further solar and wind capacity in the coming years, it is unlikely that Europe will achieve decarbonization goals only with increasing internal renewable capacity. Additional renewable capacity can only be found in the South Mediterranean countries, so Euro-Mediterranean cooperation is the only way, in our view, to match the 2013 renewable energy target for Mediterranean countries. The EU should prioritize the goal of a higher penetration of renewables in these countries. Out of 309 gigawatt of renewables installed capacity in the Mediterranean, 76% is in the European side. Only 18% in Turkey and only 3.6% in the entire shore of the southern North Africa. So a lot of investment needed. And let me underline that oil and gas trade is essentially an exchange of commodity versus money. While cooperation on hydrogen, renewables, biofuel is also industrial cooperation with these countries. It's a corporate cooperation because under a solar plant there is manufacturing, under a wind plant there is also technology, there is maintenance needs. So cooperation with these countries on renewables is not only commodity versus money, is a cooperation, a win-win cooperation to also help these countries to develop. So one key message of our report is that Europe needs to enhance Euro-Mediterranean energy dialogue for a win-win geographical and geopolitical approach. So I think my presentation is over. I put enough food for thought in the table, and I leave the floor to Professor Bompard for the second part of the presentation with some very interesting data. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm glad and honored to be here today to tell you something about the report we did. I will try to tell the story of our report. Okay, so basically, you know, what we considered in our report is we start from a black dialogue. So we are exchanging in the Mediterranean fossil fuels. There is a different allocation. And the Mediterranean is not only a region of origin, but is also a landing basin for commodities coming outside from the Mediterranean area as well. The crisis between Russia and Ukraine had an impact, and the effect was strengthening the black dialogue, and we will see a bit the Italian case. The new game changer was LNG, liquefied natural gas. That was an option to survive to the crisis. And we will consider that all these dialogues, they take place in a situation with very different geopolitical stabilities or instability of the area. What we want to move forward is the idea of a green dialogue based on renewables. But the crisis basically changed the priorities for energy between security versus sustainability. And so the idea was that the new security in the case of green dialogue is pretty much related to critical raw materials, but Massimo already said about that. And there are huge economic issues related to the fact that the black dialogue provides GDP to the countries of the southern shore of the Mediterranean. How we need to face these? There are some policy and regulatory issues that need to be faced, but also we need to understand which is the right cocktail of the energy transition in terms of selecting the commodities we want to use. So energy transition is a cocktail. Like in a cocktail, you need to choose the share of the ingredients. And in this report, we devoted some efforts in terms of assessing in a multidimensional perspective. That means energy, efficiency, cost, and readiness of the technologies that can be deployed for this purpose. So let's start our story from the present back dialogue. And so you see the situation is pretty well summarized in this way. On the left side, you can see the proved crude oil and gas reserves 2021, and you see that all the resources are into the southern shore, so basically 95%. So almost 95% of both oil and gas proved reserves of the Mediterranean area are located in the southern shore. You see that here we consider the Mediterranean with three big areas, that is southern shore, North Africa, northern shore, southern Europe, and then the east part of the Mediterranean. And as a consequence of that, we have exactly the black dialogue. So the northern and the eastern shores rely on the southern shore for about 20% and 30% of their crude oil and gas import, respectively. So given the resources, this is the dialogue we have right now. Proceeding quickly, the idea is that the Mediterranean area, if you look to the right part of the picture, is only a supplier of energy commodities to the blue part of Europe. That means to the non-Mediterranean European countries that get a part of their imports in terms of something around from 10% for oil products and crude oil, and in terms lower for the gas, around 3%, because they have other suppliers from the north. And this is a bit of a dialogue between the southern European countries that belong to the Mediterranean and the northern European countries they do not. On the left side, also, we can consider that, as I was saying, the Mediterranean area is a landing basin from commodities coming from outside the Mediterranean area. Here you see we mention United States, Qatar, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iraq. And you see, which is the imports of the Mediterranean region from non-Mediterranean countries. So you see we had a total import of around 60 tera cubic meter per year for gas, 275 million of tons per year for oil products, and more or less the same number for crude oil. From this point of view, we need to consider which is the role played by the Mediterranean as an area crossed by commodities coming to Europe through the Mediterranean from different power suppliers in the world. Briefly, the consequences of Russia-Ukraine war, some of them. So basically, we have highlighted the critical dependence on gas pipelines, especially from Russia. You know that in May 2002, Gazprom stopped the gas supply to Europe through the Yamal-Europe pipeline, while on September 26th, there was an explosion that damaged Nord Stream 1 and 2. That is the direct connection between Russia and Germany through the Baltic Sea. As in effect, and this is important for what we are going to discuss in a moment, let's say the equity or the affordability of energy, the energy price for gas and then for electricity that is mainly produced from gas at the hub in Amsterdam, TTF, grew from 70 euros per megawatt hour, February 21st, 2022, to a peak that was 350 euros per megawatt hour on August 26th. Then it went down a little bit. The current value is around 350 euros per megawatt hour. That is more or less stable, but is two times higher than was in 2021. Before the problems. The reaction of the Commission and European Union was to launch Repower Europe plan, in which one of the main goals was to counteract this crisis, reducing the energy dependency from Russia and trying even to speed up the ecological transition. Sustainability and security are sometimes conflicting objectives that we need to manage at the same time. So just to explain better what I meant, saying that the crisis with Russia was in the direction of strengthening the black dialogue. Let's have a look to the Italian case. Basically, we had 40% of gas from Russia. We get now 40% of gas from Algeria. And so Algeria replaced Russia as the main gas supplier to Italy. In October 2022, Algerian import to Transmed, that is from Algeria to Tunisia to Mazara del Vallo in Sicily, accounted for more than 40% of the imports, while Russia TAG, that is Tarvisio, northeast part of Italy, less than 1%. This is very clear, the shift I was mentioning from Russia to Algeria. So as a result, the crisis strengthened the black dialogue across the Mediterranean. If you look at this figure, you have the comparison among 3 different years, 2021, 22, and 23. And so what happened to Italy is that, you see, we increased a lot the import from Norway. So you see from 3% to 11% only in the first 9 months of 2023. And then you see also that Algeria from 30% of the share grew up to 38 just for the first period up to the end of October of this year. Libya is more or less stable, and the other important difference you can immediately spot in this plot is that the LNG is the other, let's say, resource that has been used to survive, to pass the winter in our country. So gas from Algeria and LNG are the two main considerations. So from 2021 to 2023, we have an increase in the weight of Algeria, of Norway, of Azerbaijan, and of LNG. We have the reduction, very, very marked, of the weight of Russia in our import. Moving to LNG, I think that LNG, we already said, is a crucial resource we had to use to survive. If we look to the plot, you see in 2021, 2022, and 2023, till the end of September of this year, which is the amount of LNG that has been imported to European Union. We had 81 billions of cubic meters in 2021. We grew to 133 in 2022, and we are now, I mean, till the end of September, already to 100 billions of cubic meters. It's interesting to notice which are the countries that supply Europe. And what you can immediately notice that we have Russia. So Russia is not supplying so much natural gas, but LNG, yes. You see, a share about 15%. The other interesting consideration is that United States become a very remarkable supplier for Europe. So if we look to LNG, we have some pros. That is the high flexibility, the diversification, and the possibility of increasing quickly the overall import capacity. So it's good for our European energy security. And the cons are lower affordability because it's more expensive than natural gas, because it's higher cost from the industrial point of view, and also because we have competition, especially with the Asian markets. And so you need to compete with them to get LNG. So the possible evolution, or what will be a good evolution, I think, will be a balance between the long-term contracts to reduce exposure to price volatility. They are not so much in place right now, and short-term spot market to allow for supply flexibility with LNG contracts. In the European Union, just to conclude, the import of LNG increased from 81 billion of meters cubed in 2021 to 133. And what is interesting to notice, the increased role of United States in European Union supply, that is 30% in 2023. So it is even the first one, and is followed by Qatar and Algeria in terms of LNG. The European Union import of Russian LNG, I was saying, is still there, and mainly they supply Belgium, Spain, and France with 13 billions of cubic meter, with stable, slightly growing trend. We were discussing about the geopolitics of the Mediterranean area. We have no time to go into detail, but here in this slide you can see the WGI, so the Worldwide Governance Index by the World Bank, in which they provide an index that can be used to measure the geopolitical stability of a country. And you have this index from 1 to 100. 100 is the maximum risk. So if you look top left, you see that the northern shore of the Mediterranean, where we have Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, they have more or less low values. That means that are stable countries. France is the more stable than Italy or Spain, but the numbers are around 30, 20 to 30. If you look to the southern shore, you see Algeria is 75. Egypt is 75. And if you look to Russia, the Russian index constantly increased, now from 70 to 83 in 2022. And this is due for the tension and the crisis. But what is important to notice with a metric, so with a KPI, you can see that Russia and Algeria are not very different in terms of geopolitical stability. So in the case of Italy, we shift the risk with Russia and we took a risk with Algeria. But with these numbers, we have no time to go into many details. You can see that there is not a huge difference, although it was not possible to have another option, of course. So when we consider the security of supply, the geopolitical stability of the countries and of the energy corridors to provide the commodity to our entry point is crucial, and will be still a very important point in the mid term. Okay, the green dialogue. So we were saying that basically we have a triangle of attribute for energy: sustainability, security, and equity. Sustainability is environmental, security is the possibility to have the commodities we need, and equity and affordability is the prices. Basically, what happened with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis was a shift, or you say this triangle rotated, and it put it at the top: equity and security. Equity for the prices I was mentioning for gas, for example. Security because we do not have the commodity we need, or we risk it not to have the commodity. So sustainability is important, but it is a different, let's say, time scale. So not to have the gas will imply a problem this winter, last winter, while sustainability is more a long term. So in this, from this point of view, you see the priority has been changed, and the challenge is to put together two objectives, maybe conflicting or to a certain extent conflicting, that are security, sustainability, and equity. Okay, one good idea maybe to have the green dialogue I was mentioning before. And so what? Which is the situation from the green dialogue is completely different from the black dialogue, because in this case, let's say advanced countries are on the North Shore, so are the Southern European countries. And very little has been done in the Southern Shore and even in the Eastern Shore. So the rest development in the three Mediterranean shores show large differences. In 2022, out of around 300 gigawatt of renewable energy sources installed with their capacity, 66% was in the North Shore, 18% in Turkey, and only less than 4%, 3.5% in the Southern Shore. So to match their national targets, even the targets that the Southern European Mediterranean countries set for themselves, we need to have a very huge increase in the rate of deployment of RES. While European countries can benefit from consolidated regulatory frameworks and technical knowledge, the situation is more difficult for the southern countries. So you see, this is a reverse situation with respect to the one we saw for fossil fuels. Nevertheless, this is the way to go. I will not insist too much about the critical raw materials because Dr. De Andres already explained this. So the situation is we are dependent now in terms of security from commodities, energy commodities from abroad, from outside Europe. Italy, 70% of dependency. European Union, I don't know exactly, more or less 50%. But we will shift these dependencies if we go for the green dialogue toward the critical raw materials. The situation is they are in different countries. Some countries are maybe perceived as more friendly, like Australia. Some countries can be perceived as less friendly, like China. And you know, there is not a war, but there are tensions between US and the Western world and China. The issue is we need to be very careful in this. We cannot go into many details, but for example, I give you just an example that the Greenbush mine, that is the largest lithium mine of the world, that is producing in 2022 61% of the total lithium from Australia. They are in, let's say, in cooperation with Chinese companies. So this idea of Frenchness is, I mean, to a certain extent, need to be considered carefully. You know better than me, of course, these, but the critical raw material acts or from the Commission tried to, let's say, to put some goals at the European level. Let me just underline that what they expect to meet is 10% of European annual consumption by domestic extraction and 15% by domestic recycling. Even if we do this, we are far away to be secure, because you see there is a large share that cannot be satisfied. And also the idea to have no more than 65% by a single third country, okay, is nice, is what maybe is doable, but is not so secure. Okay, I will pass to another kind of important issue in our opinion, that is the economic of the Mediterranean in terms of energy. So we were saying that we have a black dialogue, and the countries from North Africa, so the southern shore of the Mediterranean, can be characterized, at least a couple of them, as rentier state. That means they get actually a large share of their welfare, their richness in terms of GDP, gross domestic product, from the fossil commodities. So the transition is heavily tackled by the presence of two rentier states, Algeria and Libya, whose economies are almost completely relying on hydrocarbons export. If you look in the map, you see the black, there is the map of each country, and you see which is the share of GDP that is related to the hydrocarbons, so to the fossil commodity. You see, in one case it's 88%, in the other one is 96%. For Egypt, a little bit less, 30%, so it's almost a rentier state, but this is very important. So energy transition requires large investment in infrastructure, especially in the southern shore. We saw that they are lagging behind to exploit the potential, but we need to be very careful not to be what they call, to do what they call energy neocolonialism. You know, there was a huge project some years ago, I will not remember, in which the idea was exactly this. We produce and we export. If we do not take care of, let's say, developing a local industry and the local economy based on renewables, and we take out the economy based on fossil fuels, the political instability of the southern shore will be a disaster. And then all the and that will be reflected to the northern shore, to the southern European countries, think to the problem of immigration, migrants, and so forth. So this is very important. In 2021, 85% of the overall public investment in renewables in the Mediterranean region, something around 3.5 billion of US dollars per year, was concentrated in three countries that were European countries on the northern shore: Spain 40%, France 35%, Italy 10%. So we're missing investment in the southern shore, and the investments are also critical because we are going to ask people to invest in countries with very high political instabilities. These investments are affected by several factors. Some are national, difficulty in defining coherent and solid policies and in balancing sustainability, security, and equity priorities. Some of them are regional, lack of convergence among policy of the various countries, and also from the technological point of view, misalignment of standards and technological choices. And then are international, so negative influences on prices due to the turbulence of global market, unavoidable incidence of price, cost, financial decision, access to technology due to global conflict. Again, Russian-Ukraine war plays a role. I will just conclude with a couple of slides saying that, okay, we said that energy transition is a cocktail, and so we need to put together different commodities. Electricity from renewables is expected to assume the central role in the future energy mix and in building a new green dialogue within the Mediterranean region. However, electricity cannot completely decarbonize by itself the Mediterranean energy. There are some hard to abate applications like industrial, aviation, and transport in which we need to consider, in which electricity is not the best choice. So we need a synergy between electricity and other commodities like green hydrogen, alternative fuels, geothermal, solar, and maybe nuclear. Allora, I'm going to conclude. Okay, so just to conclude, I will move to the conclusion. In the go to the next slide, please. And the next slide. In the one more, please. Okay, so in the report, you will find a detailed analysis of technologies in terms of cost, efficiency, and readiness, technological readiness. And you can see the difference, let's say, levels of the technology that will be that we need to put together in order to make the transition in Europe. Please go ahead. Okay, this is just to announce that we are developing a software platform that can be accessible from the web for this analysis. In the next months, we will deliver that. And then I will just conclude with these conclusions. So the geopolitical events and relations widely affect the Mediterranean energy system, with reference both to the current configuration, that is the black diagram we were mentioning, and the possible and maybe desirable evolution toward a green dialogue, shifting the dependence from fossil commodities to critical raw material. Mediterranean countries will have to choose whether to firmly steer toward a cooperative and cross-shore approach to the energy transition or not. The effort conducted in the last decade are not sufficient, so the situation is lacking of more actions. A cooperative transformation of the energy sector in the Mediterranean will leave to be based on two main factors: a convergence of policy and regulation and the need to mobilize private actors. Such transformation implies profound geopolitical changes. Some may be beneficial, new opportunity to industrial venture trade, and some other potential results in criticalities. Through hydrocarbons, hydrocarbons are central to the economies of the Mediterranean country. The transition could be achievable to the production of renewable fuels like green gases. However, there are still market differences between the regulation of the European Union and the southern and eastern shores, where the situation is still maturing, and we need to act in this way. And last, the long-term vision and implemented action have to consider the inescapable policy goals: diversification of sources for increasing the supply of security, decarbonization of the energy sector, and alignment with the climate action, while consider social, economic, and political objectives. So, with this, I've done.
Thank you, Professor Bompard. I would like now to give the floor to Stefano Grassi, who is the head of cabinet of Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simpson. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Madam Passamonte. Just to check if you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very sorry I cannot be with you in person. I'm connecting from the College of Europe in Bruges, where I had a commitment to participate to an event with the Diplomatic Academy, talking about the geopolitics of energy. And this leads me once again to thank Madam Toia, Madam Beghin, the other members of the European Parliament, and Professor Profumo for giving me the opportunity to intervene in your presentation and in the discussion on the MED, the Italian Energy Report 23. I had the possibility to listen to the two excellent and comprehensive presentations from Professor Bompard and Professor De Andres, and I see a lot of convergence and alignment between their analysis and our thinking in the European Commission. And first, I will subscribe to the remark that the European Union has been a bit forced to look towards its southern neighborhood and the Mediterranean with more attention and with greater focus than it has usually done in the past by the Ukrainian crisis, because this has been the crisis has been a strong driver of a geopolitical reorientation for our energy system and for Europe as a geopolitical actor, from the north to the south and from the east to the west. And this has certainly pushed us to devote much more time and attention to what is happening in the Mediterranean. And I would also support very much I think a reference from Professor De Andreis is warning that Europe, while it is legitimately setting itself a goal of becoming less dependent or even energy independent in the coming years through its decarbonization and the transition to a clean energy system, we have to remind ourselves that even under the best scenarios, we will never be able to be self-sufficient or to produce domestically through home sources all the power, the electricity, and the energy we need for our economy. Even under the best assumptions, even by 2040, we will not even be closer to 70 or 70% or 80% of domestic production of power in Europe. So we have to be very vigilant, very cautious, and not to ever slide into a narrative or European fortress or a European system not open to trade. We will always remain a continent and an energy system open to trade and imports from the rest of the world, and the Mediterranean is a resource-rich area towards which we need to look at in priority. And I was mentally trying to see how much progress we've done under this commission and in this mandate of the European Parliament and the Commission towards in our relation and energy relationship with the Mediterranean. And I have to say, we will leave this commission will leave his office with leaving a legacy of intensification and strengthening of our relations with the Mediterranean, where we probably did not imagine we could live at the beginning of this mandate. If I look starting from the West, we have now concluded a green partnership, a very comprehensive set of partnership with Morocco across all, from the environment to climate to energy, across the board, which is a platform for further cooperation. We have reactivated and intensified an energy dialogue with Algeria, which was lingering. My commissioner went back to Algeria in 2022 after years that the dialogue was not taking place. And this year, the Algerian delegation came to Brussels to mark the fact that now it's an annual event, and we have brought our relationship, I think, to one of the highest points in the history of EU and Algeria energy relations. Moving to Tunisia, we have just announced a few days ago the inclusion in the list of projects of mutual interest under the Connecting Europe facility and the 10E framework of the project ELMEC, connecting the Sicilian shore with Tunisia with an electricity cable, which initially will possibly bring renewable electricity from Italy to Tunisia, but then it will become the main driver and channel of export of green electricity from Tunisia and the region towards the northern shore. So even in a situation of very difficult, as well known, cooperation with Tunisia and the fragility of the country, this project is a glimpse of hope. And then we have, as you all know, work with Egypt and Israel to conclude a memorandum of understanding of energy cooperation. We have reinforced our gas relationship with Egypt, and as exported last year, almost 4 BCM of LNG towards Europe, has become a significant supplier, and we hope, despite all the tensions, will continue to be, is a strong player in the Eastern Mediterranean. And we have included in the list of PMI, the project of mutual interest that I was mentioning before, a new electricity interconnection between Egypt and Greece, the GREGI project, which will also be a driver for developing renewable electricity projects in Egypt. And lastly, I think 1 week ago, we have reassessed our relationship with Turkey, and we have indicated the Commission is proposing to the Council to reactivate the energy dialogue with Turkey after years of freeze due to the tensions in Syria and the Eastern Mediterranean. So if I look at what we have done over the last 4 years, this idea of bringing the black dialogue towards green dialogue and intensifying the relationship with the area of the Mediterranean has become a reality. And we leave a legacy, I think, stronger for those who will come after us. But we are also equally aware that what we have created has created an opportunity that requires quite a lot of work to be consolidated and to be advanced. I think first, again, linking up with the two presentations, what I see is the need to bring our relationship and our partnership from a partnership which is mainly based on the dialogues on exports on fossil fuels into a fully fledged, future-proof green partnership. And here we have a lot of enthusiasm with each of these countries. We discuss hydrogen, we discuss potential in green electricity, development in domestic offshore, on onshore wind, solar. But I think that there is a lot of we need more structure, we need to prioritize, we need to identify the projects that really have a chance to take off and to be commissioned in the coming years and to make a difference in the coming years. And I think this requires much more granular and concrete work within the framework, the general framework that we have created of this partnership and memoranda of understanding. I do also agree that we need to be careful and in engaging with these countries also to balance support to their own domestic electricity production and in general economic development with what we need for exports. It is a thin line that we need to walk. And I do believe that we need also to rethink some of the instruments that they are deploying. Now we mainly use these projects of mutual interest, the ENI funding, the European Neighborhood Instruments funding. But I think we need possibly different type of instruments, a bigger volume of funding, ability to do capacity building, to bring more private investor and even technology providers to those countries. So we need also not only the political dialogue, but the business to business dialogue. And final point, if we want this partnership to evolve, to be future oriented, these countries are indeed very much linked and tied to the revenues coming from the fossil exports. We need to show them that they can also have a positive partnership and revenue raising partnership in the future through other commodities. And we need, I think, a constant political attention. We need constant visit of commissioners at the political level, the commitment to interparliamentary dialogue, because indeed what Professor Bompard was underlining, the risk, the political risk in these countries are very high. So we need a commitment also to help their stability, to help their, to show with our support that they are on reformist governments are on the right track, and we need to continue to help them. Final point that I wanted to make, I think we need also to understand our energy security, not only in terms of commodity trade, not only in terms of export, import of fossil fuels, hydrogen or electricity, but energy security comes also through secure supply chains. And this, I think, gives a reflection to us. We need possibly more stronger supply chains within Europe in terms of clean techs, but we cannot do everything in Europe. And in some cases, there are comparative advantages in the location of some of the production in the neighboring countries in the Mediterranean. So maybe that's another area where we need to reflect and to see how we can redesign some of the supply chains for clean energy technologies whether wind, whether solar, whether hydrogen, also in partnership with these countries, offering to them opportunities in terms of jobs and growth by localizing some of investment, manufacturing investment also in this country. So I do think that this report will help all this reflection. I think we have possibly, contrary to expectations and maybe due to an external pressure from the Ukraine crisis, I think the way Europe is engaging with the Mediterranean in energy has changed. It's changing a lot. But I think this is only the starting point, and to bring all of that into positive, lasting, sustainable partnership and relations, there is quite a lot of work that has to be done. And I think this is a bit the legacy and the task this mandate of the Parliament and the Commission will leave to the next one. Thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity, and I give you back the floor.
Thank you so much, Stefano, for this, for your speech. And now, since we are running short, I give the floor directly to Professor Saracco, who is the Dean of the Politecnico di Torino.
Yes, I was supposed to do the wrap up after the discussion that is not going to take place. So I'm going to discuss myself with the speakers. Basically, I think that we all share the vision of Europe as our home as far as values are concerned. We feel in a common place because we share values that are not common everywhere in the world. However, sustainability is just one of the sides of the problems that we have to solve. Already the United Nations told us that we have 17 goals to be faced at once. And global warming and energy security is only one of these sides. Sustainability has to be coupled with the security and also with equity. And in this, you have so many different sides to be taken into account. And one of the most important features of the report that we have been analyzing is that it provides you the data to try to design something in all these directions. The multi-commodity approach is, after all, in the energy sector, a must, and we have seen why it is a must. These are the days where the COP28 has been held in Dubai. That looks like a joke, but it's reality. And more we have conference of parties after the Paris agreements. We understand that there's going to be a long transition, and it's not going to be easy. And it's going to be a crucial geopolitical issue. We have very big elephants in the room. And China is the largest one, the biggest one. China is now using more energy per gross power generated, but China is now the manufacturing side of the world. It hosts all the energy-intensive manufacturing facilities. Of course, Europe has given this to them. It's more based on tertiary, not to mention US, that also it goes on that side. So it's natural that we are consuming less energy. It's not a virtue. It's possibly a mistake we made, sorry. And China is using a lot of energy, of bad energy, but has in their hands, because that was a clear decision by Xi Jinping, the renewable energy market, photovoltaics, lithium-based batteries, and has such a big power in their hands, economically speaking, that it's going to govern the market. And the point is that when they come here, they also offer the recovery of lithium processes, which is something that we do not have to leave them. That's for sure. That in Turin, we have the Stellantis area where the circular economy of cars and lithium batteries there. And we have to develop this. This is going to give us 10% of freedom because you cannot really recover more than that into the new lithium-ion batteries. But it is something that we have to keep in our hands and work on it. China is our main competitor in Africa, and I fully agree that Africa is the future for us. But it's such a complex system where China has been getting into saying, look, the Europeans have treated you in an extractive way. We are the new friends of yours. Now, I believe that Africa is the battle that we have to fight. It's not just from the energy viewpoint. I believe that we have to establish new manufacturing equilibria. Unfortunately, there is no more margin to produce cars in Italy or in France as it used to be. They are going to be manufactured in Morocco, in Tunisia. This is already decided, Algeria. So in this sort of reshoring, reorganizing, I believe that it's not just greening the black deal of energy with Africa, which is a very important issue, but also reestablishing alliances with that area of the world that is in front of us, as Europe I'm talking. And this requires attention and politics. And I believe that universities can do a part of this alliance, because I am in favor of sending our universities to let Africa grow in a sustainable way. It's going to cost some efforts. But if I see the Club of Rome last report, in Italian it's Una terra per tutti. I'm not sure that it is the same title in English, but in any case, one of the 5 pillars for a sustainable development is the emancipation of women. Africa, if we let Africa grow in a sustainable way, we are going to have less starving people. We are going to have less migrants. We are going to have more renewable energy to us. We're going to have new commercial opportunities. So to close this, I believe that the battle is in those countries like Australia, like Africa, like South America, where the critical raw materials are, and this is something that we need to be acting as European countries like fingers of the same hand. I see people looking at me. I hope I gave you some more insights from an outcomer from the authorship, because I'm just director of his university and I'm a close cooperator to Intesa. But I guess that it has been an interesting afternoon, and that I go back home with a lot of more issues and arrows for my brainstorming. And I hope that this is going to be fruitful also for European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Saracco, for sharing your thoughts. And now we are reaching, really, we are very close to the end of this event. I would like to give the floor to Consigliere Michelangelo Nerin of the Italian permanent representation to the EU. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I understand we have little time, but I would like first of all to thank the organizers for this very extremely interesting event, full of thoughts and stimulating discussions. I would like also to bring forward best regards from Ambassador Berecchia, who is currently in Coreper. We seem to have concurrent engagements all over this period of the year, but this report is particularly important. I'm also particularly glad for having been given the opportunity to share with you some closing reflections, even though it will be in a short format, possibly. First, I would like to highlight here, taking some of the ideas that I've heard, that energy is paradigmatic of the challenges that the common European home, as it's been called, is going through, especially when seen through the lenses of geopolitics. The prosperity, security, and strategic autonomy of the European Union depend fundamentally on its ability to produce, obtain energy in a stable, abundant, and economical way. Today, the EU is approaching, indeed, the end of an institutional cycle, marked by some of the deepest challenges since World War II. This has been the pandemic, first of all, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and the recent economic shocks, the ensuing economic shocks, including those that might come from instability in the Middle East. So Europe was forced to face a harsher reality and maybe to think the unthinkable, while at the same time taking advantage of these challenges to redefine its own priorities. I would say that the war in Ukraine and the related energy crisis in particular have highlighted the need for Europe to give a unified response to supply shocks, to uncontrolled prices increases and geopolitical variables. All in all, as it's been highlighted also by Stefano online, Europe has been able to respond to the challenges by promoting also unprecedented measures such as the Repower EU plan. All in all, we believe that we have protected EU citizens and businesses from energy shocks and shortages, as well as accelerating the transition to clean energy. We have indeed approved or are about to approve an unprecedented package of regulatory measures in the energy field, as we're finalizing the Fit for 55 package. And all in all, Europe, we believe, is now better protected and better prepared on the energy front as ever before. So all in all, despite all the external pressures and constraints, the green energy transition has not lost either its meaning or purpose. It is imperative, of course, and urgent to address the climate change and environmental degradation, which represent real existential threats for Europe and the world. But the transition to a competitive and low-carbon economy must take into account social costs and its intrinsic economic costs, as it's been highlighted as well in the report. Because we need to gather and to maintain the support of citizens, stakeholders, and to avoid creating new strategic dependencies. There is no silver bullet, and I think the report very well highlights this point. No pre-established solution, either political or technological. We need to act on multiple fronts simultaneously, make use of a plurality of tools, be inventive and diversify both sources and partners in order to develop new energy mix, both at the national and European level. Some words on Italy. In this very complex scenario, Italy has been very active and forward-looking. In 2022 and going forward, it's been exceptionally engaged to diversify natural gas supply sources, through the signing of several new pipeline and LNG supply agreements, increasing the use of existing infrastructure, including storage and regasification plants, redirecting gas supplies mainly from the Mediterranean, and thus managing to halve imports from Russia already in mid-2022. And now, as you know, these imports are very limited. So the deepening geopolitical rift, as it's been said by speakers before, along Europe's eastern flank, and the imperative for diversification of gas supplies has brought back the Mediterranean at the center stage and offers now Italy the opportunity to position itself as a hub or a gateway, as the report highlights, becoming a crucial entry point for gas and its transport from other European countries, de facto overturning the traditional north-south paradigm. So as an immediate next step, what is the strategy? Existing and new infrastructures can serve as the basis for accelerating the energy transition both in Europe and in Africa. Italy, together with its neighbors, can play a strategic role in promoting the diversification of EU suppliers' energy sources new field investments in green hydrogen and electricity from renewables, while promoting economic development and stability of supplier countries. Professor, you were highlighting this point before, in a spirit of partnership, because this cannot be unidirectional. It must be a mutually beneficial process. This is really the ambition and the raison d'etre of the Mattei Plan. Let me just highlight this point because it's a strategic vision of our government, where energy cooperation with our Mediterranean partner is a cornerstone and a positive tool of a new energy diplomacy. Some projects have been recalled, especially by the Commission, by Stefano, that can exemplify this new drive towards the Mediterranean and towards Africa. First, the South Corridor, promoted by SNAM, Rete Gas, which will transport the green hydrogen from North Africa to Central Europe, crossing Italy, Austria, and Germany, which has now been admitted to the final list of projects of common interest by the EU. And then ENEMED, which also has been quoted, and I would like to recall again, the electricity interconnection between Italy and Tunisia, whose grant agreement has been recently finalized here in Brussels, and we were honored to be part of the press ceremony. So let me just conclude now with a note of appreciation for the success of this event and for the quality of the report, which is really excellent. As the research clearly indicates, I will try to summarize in one word, in one long sentence maybe. We need to balance the harsh reality of geopolitics with the imperative of keeping sustainability as our main generational goal, pursuing at the same time energy security, protection of the environment, social equity, and cooperation within a rule-based international order, which is also very important, which is our main driver as Italian diplomacy. So this is the fine line we have to walk, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. And I think we are really running very late, so we need to close and leave immediately this room. Thank you so much for attending this meeting.